Hello. Today we're going to be looking at Cisco Academy's Introduction to Cybersecurity, version 2.1, Chapter 4, Protecting the Organization. These are the two sections that are in Chapter 4. So we have one on firewalls, and then there's also a section on behavior approach to cybersecurity, and you can read through the objectives in each one of those sections. Don't forget, at this point, we're talking about the organization. So a lot of the time, we're talking about how the corporate world would protect their organization. And then there is a third section called Cisco's Approach to Cybersecurity. When you're doing this third section, I'm going to recommend that you look for some YouTube videos on some of the tools that they're going to discuss. This might be an opportunity for you to give students certain tools to research. So if you notice in the picture, you see some computers and you see a server. So that server and the computers are protected by what's called a firewall. In the last chapter, if you look at the very last bullet point here, it says a host-based firewall filtering of ports and system service calls on a single computer operating system. We looked at that on how to make sure the firewall is turned on both a Windows and a Mac machine. So those are host-based firewalls. But notice there are network layer firewalls as well. And those would basically filter on the source and the destination IP address. Depending on what you're trying to filter, they would look at the source and the destination IP address and decide whether it's a permit or a deny. Transport layer firewall, so don't forget that is the, if you think about the OSI model, that is layer 4 in the OSI model. Network layer was layer 3. And that would be permitting or denying based on source and destination data ports or the connection states. Is the port open or is the port closed? And then you can do an application layer firewall as well, so it depends on the program or the service that's trying to be run. Notice there's something called a context-aware application firewall, a proxy server, and a proxy server will basically answer web requests. So it might decide whether a student is allowed to access a certain website depending on what the web content is set on that proxy service. And notice you can do a reverse proxy server. So normally when we think about proxy server, we're thinking about a server that's sitting inside our school and it's deciding whether a certain student or a group of students or even staff can access a certain website. Reverse proxy server, you would be basically deciding who can contact or access your server. Network address translation. This is a big part of what we study in computer networking. And in a network these days, most of us have what we call private addresses. And when we get ready, our computer systems get ready to go out to the internet, they must be passed off a public IP address that's allowed out on the internet. And that is done by a network address translation firewall. When we talk about firewalls, firewalls will have ports that are open ports that are closed, depending on what they want to allow traffic to be able to do. One that we normally keep open, especially on web servers, would be your HTTPS. So that would be a port that we would probably have open on a web server. And you can do some research if you haven't studied networking before, and you can go out and you can research port numbers and to see what port numbers are assigned to each running application on the device. We will look at, in just a few minutes, a port scanning tool. And when we look at that port scanning tool, and you will see a sample in the window right beside us, and that is the application that we're going to look at in just a second, ZenMap. And notice this particular one is running, if you look at the operating system, it's running Linux 3. We're going to see that it's got some ports open. And based on those ports, we can decide whether the traffic is going to be filtered, dropped, or blocked, closed, denied, or not listening, or open or accepted. So let's pop out right now of the PowerPoint. So we'll come out of the PowerPoint for just a second. And we'll go over here to the one that they recommend in the coursework that you take a look at is a port scanning tool called ZenMap. So this is just nmap.org. And when I went in here, notice there's some download information that we can look at. And I'm just going to skip right to where I went to download. So I'm running a Mac. So I found what I needed to download for my Mac operating system. But notice I can also click on Windows. And notice here are the directions if you're doing it for Windows. And also, if you're going to notice back here, there were directions. If I went too far, there were directions for Linux as well. So here's Linux, all distributions. Okay, so let's look for what that application looks like. Let me find it for you. So it's called ZenMap. It's the one that I downloaded. And again, this is going to be something that probably as a teacher, you might be able to download this, but I doubt that your networking department's going to let your entire class download a port scanner. Now, what you could do is set up a tiny make-believe network in your classroom. Set everybody on a 192.168.0.0 network, and then have them access some information. So you could do it within a closed network if you needed to. So what I did here is I just downloaded the app. I know that my router in my home is 192.168.0.1, so I just did a target there and did a intense scan, and it's going to scan for open ports. So you're going to notice we see right here that open port is 80, 445, 139, and 8080. So those are open. And again, in this particular chapter, I don't think it would hurt to have students do some research on port numbers if they have never done that before. I also have a device on my network that's a 19. So just to see it again, I'm going to do another intense scan. Just do scan. And we're going to see something very similar. So notice it says 80, 111, and 555. So by looking at these scans, I could probably, if I did some research, I could probably figure out what this device was on my network. Notice it's based on a Linux kernel that's running Linux 2.6x. And notice this should give you some keys as to what this device is. So again, that's just a look at what a port scanner looks like. And in the curriculum, they do talk about ZenMap. So that might be a reason that you want to take a look at that one. Now also in the curriculum, they talk about, and let me see if I have it, this online port scanner. So this is an online port scanner, and you're going to notice what I did here is I actually put in a public IP address of 72.163.4.185. I did a quick Nmax scan, and when I did that, it shows me what ports are opened. And notice this is Cisco.com. So this shows me some ports that are open at Cisco.com. And this is the type of information. In fact, I can put Cisco.com in here, and you're going to notice it's going to look very similar. This is how I found out the IP address. So I found out the IP address, and I did it the reverse way. Notice it does say that even though port 21 is open, it's being filtered. Same thing with Telnet, because both Telnet and FTP are two protocols that are not very secure. So sometimes it's interesting to find those open. And the same thing with HTTP. HTTPS is our preferred web browsing protocol at this point. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. They're going to talk about security appliances. In this picture, you're going to see routers. So these are routers. And firewalls, you're going to notice, can also have routing capabilities. And a lot of times to look at an outside of a device, you will not know whether it's a firewall or a router. So they will look very similar from the outside. And a firewall can do routing. And you can do things called access control list on a router, and you can filter. So you can do some traffic filtering with access control list. An IPS is dedicated to intrusion prevention, and we discussed VPNs in the last section, designed for secure encrypted tunneling. And Cisco does have a hardware device that is used for advanced malware protection. So it's actually a device that's set up to protect against malware. And notice it comes in next generation Cisco router firewalls, the intrusion prevention system devices, web and email security appliances can also be installed as software in host computers. So this is big with Cisco devices. And there's other security devices out there as well. So when we're talking about attacks, a zero-day attack, it was just found, and it's a good chance if it's a zero-day attack that no company has chance to write anything that's going to block this. So notice it says a hacker exploits a flaw in a piece of software before the creator can fix it. Detecting attacks in real time requires actively scanning for attacks using firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and intrusion prevention systems. So that's what the IDS and the IPS stands for. Then finally, they're going to talk about distributed denial of service attacks again. Don't forget that's one of the biggest attack threats requiring real-time response and detection. They're extremely difficult to defend against because the attacks originate from hundreds or thousands of zombie hosts, and the attacks appear as legitimate traffic as shown in that picture. And don't forget, these will quickly take down a network, so the network cannot be used because the victim is basically being attacked in by so many different zombies that it will take it down. So Cisco does have an advanced malware protection called AMP Threat Grid that analyzes millions of files and correlates them against hundreds of millions of other analyzed malware artifacts. AMP is client-server software deployed on host endpoints as a standalone server on other network security devices. And this is showing the benefits of using the Cisco AMP Threat Grid. What you could do for this, and I would recommend this for a lot of the Cisco devices that they're going to study for the rest of this chapter, is go to cisco.com and find some marketing videos where they're basically showing the benefits of using Cisco AMP Threat Grid. That's how I would approach it if I were you. A lot of security best practices. There is a link in this particular chapter to go to SANS Institute. Don't forget, we talked about that in one of the previous recordings, that they offer training and certifications. And again, that's called SANS, S-A-N-S Institute. And there is a link for it right in the curriculum. So when you look at this and you kind of go down through it, it says implement a network monitoring analytics and management tool. Cisco does sell those types of devices. Of course, other companies do as well. Implement network security devices. Use next generation routers, firewalls, and other security appliances. So if you're using a next generation router, they are going to include the services such as AMP, that advanced malware protection. So they're going to include that in that next generation router. So a botnet is a group of bots that are connected through the internet with the ability to be controlled by a malicious individual or group. A bot computer is typically infected by visiting a website, opening an email attachment, or opening an infected media file. A botnet can have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of bots, and they can be activated to distribute malware, launch distributed denial of service attacks, distribute spam email, or execute brute force password attacks. Cyber criminals will often rent out botnets for a fee to third parties for different purposes. And in the picture there, they're giving you some, shows you how a botnet traffic filter is used to inform the worldwide security community of botnet locations. So they've got a Cisco adaptive security appliance in there, and it's doing the filter. And since it's an intrusion prevention system, it's going to basically block things. So when you see that step 1, it says infected clients try to communicate with a command and control host on the internet. So basically, the security intelligence operations of Cisco update the Cisco ASA botnet filter list. The destination is a known attack site. Alerts go out to the security teams for prevention, mitigation, and remediation. And this is something that the students, if they're going to study cybersecurity, will eventually need to understand and pretty much memorize, that this is the kill chain, is the stages of an information systems attack. So reconnaissance is where the attacker is gathering information. The weaponization is where they create a targeted exploit and malicious payload. So this is going to how they're going to attack. The delivery, they send the exploit and malicious payload to the target. They execute that exploit. It's going to install malware and backdoors. Give command and control, remote control from a command and control channel on the server. And that it's going to perform its malicious action or additional attacks on other devices. It says the figure shows how each stage of the kill chain equates to an increase in the amount of effort and cost to inhibit and remediate attacks. Now, notice here they're going to talk about honeypots, and you can do some really good research on the internet about honeypots. And they lure the attacker by appealing to the attacker's predictable behavior. So these are built so that administrators can gain more knowledge and build a better defense. And we're going to pop out of this in just a second, and we're going to look at Cisco's cyber threat defense solution architecture. So they have built an architecture to provide greater visibility, context, and control. So let's look at that right now. So notice a honeypot is a computer security mechanism set to detect, deflect, or in some manner counteract attempts at unauthorized use of information systems. Generally, a honeypot consists of data, for example, a network site that appears to be a legitimate part of the site, but is actually isolated and monitored, and that seems to contain information or resource of value to attackers who are then blocked. Notice it says these are similar to police sting operations. So what they're trying to do with these honeypots is bait a suspect. And these are what will allow, like Cisco's threat defense, those types of things, to work better because they have set up these honeypots. Here's another where it says, if you, for instance, were in charge of IT security for a bank, you might have set up a honeypot system that to outsider looks like the bank's network. The same goes for those in charge of or researching other types of secure internet-connected systems. By monitoring traffic to such systems, you can better understand where criminals are coming from, how they operate, and what they want. For more importantly, you can determine which security measures you have in place are working and which ones may need improvement. And they go over here, they are going to go over basically how Symantec, Norton Antivirus parent company, set up a honeypot to track attacks on so-called Internet of Things devices back in 2015. And again, when you're looking at Cisco cyber threat defense, an overview on that, I would either look on YouTube or look on Cisco.com for some videos that might explain it better than just looking at it, because they will show you some of the web pages, etc., that will be used if somebody's using Cisco's cyber threat defense solution. And we'll just click on this one because notice it says it's going to give us an overview. Notice it looks pretty wordy, so we're not going to go over that right now, but this is something you might want to look at further with students depending on what your goal is for this course. Later on in the course, they are going to go over security information and event management. So that's another thing that you can Google and find more information about. And later in the course, they're also going to go over SNORT. And notice it's an intrusion prevention system capable of performing real-time traffic analysis and packet logging on IP networks. It can perform protocol analysis, content searching, matching, can be used to detect a variety of attacks and probes, such as buffer overflow, port scans, and fingerprinting. So quite a few things in here that snort. So they're going to go over that later on in the curriculum as well. Everything that they do in this chapter is more as of high level. So you're going to have to decide, in your networking team, this might be a good time to have them come in and talk to your class, because they could probably show them some of the tools, or at least talk to them about some of the tools that they use for intrusion prevention, etc. NetFlow is a protocol that will gather information about data flowing through a network, and notice all of the information that is collected. And you can take the NetFlow information, and the network administrator can set that up that would go log on to a server. And switches, routers, and firewalls are equipped with NetFlow and can report information about data entering, leaving, and traveling through the network. Information is sent to the NetFlow collectors that collect, store, and analyze that NetFlow records. So one of the best ways to prepare for a security breach is to prevent one. So notice they're talking about here computer security incident response team. And notice it helps ensure company system and data preservation by performing comprehensive investigations in computer security incidents. And notice it's many companies that work together to make this happen. And by doing this, what you might find out is, ideally, security playbook must accomplish the following actions: detect malware, detect suspicious network activity, detect irregular authentication attempts, describe and understand inbound and outbound traffic, provide summary information including trends, statistics, and counts, provide usable and quick access to statistics and metrics, and correlate events across all data sources. Got a little ahead of myself there. So this is kind of a review of what I just said. And here's some more tools for incident prevention and detection. When you're going over this chapter in the curriculum, there is a video that goes with it. So I do recommend that you play the video, and that should help you. But these, again, are tools that will help with incident prevention and detection. Again, there's an intrusion detection system, and there's an intrusion prevention system. When you read through the curriculum, you want to read the difference between the two. You might want to look up some graphics that describe the difference in the two. Notice that the intrusion detection system does not prevent the attacks, but they do detect them, log them, and report them. And the intrusion prevention systems will block or deny the traffic. So how they're placed in your network will be a little bit different. And an example of an intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, is Snort, which we kind of peeked at that earlier when we were out looking at WebPage. And the commercial version of Snort is Cisco's Snort SourceFire. So that SourceFire has the ability to perform real-time traffic, port analysis, logging, content searching, and matching, and can detect probes, attacks, and port scan. It also integrates with other third-party tools for reporting, performance, and log analysis. I will tell you that Cisco Academy does have a curriculum called CCNA CyberOps, where we download Snort and we use Snort for some labs. As a Cisco Academy instructor, you do have access under resources. If you go resources, course resources, you do have access to the labs for CCNA CyberOps, even if you do not take that course. So if you wanted to look at some of the labs that are in there, and they do have some virtual machines in there as well that have Snort already installed. So if you wanted to go beyond the call of just this chapter, you could look at that. And again, Cybersecurity Essentials will take you deeper into the IDS and the IPS. I think the big part in this chapter is just to know that one of them actually blocks or denies the traffic, which is the IPS. The IDS just reports it. So it reports it, and it has to depend on a network administrator some sort to see that report and then decide if they need to do something about that attack. And Snort's going to help you set up an IDS or an IPS system on your network. We'll talk about Chapter 5 in the next recording. Thank you.